We did it! We gotta use that. 500 subscribers to the Batcave Q&A episode and contest giveaway starts now. Hi guys, welcome back to the Batcave. I am your host, Lady Hellbat, and we're here in our 500 subscriber episode. I want to thank you all so much for participating. I got such amazing questions. It was really hard to pick which ones to answer, but I picked a whole bunch of them, and even if I didn't pick your question, I'll put you in the draw. Just 'cause. So to kick things off, I have a question from Rachel's Media, which reads, what makes you love the horror genre so much? Is there something specific that got you very interested in this genre? Well, that's a fantastic question to kick off this Q&A, first of all. I suppose I first became interested in horror when I was adolescent and I started becoming very critical of mainstream media. I would watch all these comedies and I would watch all these dramas and I would watch them and just promptly forget them. Horror movies, on the other hand, I'd watch The Exorcist, The Shining, The Thing. I'd watch these movies again and again, and I'd get something new out of them every time I watched them. They just fascinated me. Now, it wasn't until I got to university and I started to study sociology that I started to really engage with what horror movies meant to me. And I realized that I was very critical of mainstream media because it felt very patronizing and prescriptive to me. I felt like there was all this messaging about what I should look like and what I should be doing with my life and how I should feel and what I should think, and none of these really related to my lifestyle and the way I live. But when I watched horror movies, there was all these ideas, even when they weren't very progressive, even when they were sexist or racist, there was plenty of material to engage with. And I realized that there was a lot more to horror movies than just gruesome kills and chills. So nowadays, I have zero patience for mainstream Hollywood stuff. I'm all horror all the way. Next question. Haley Bales asks, what are some of your favorite scary horror books? Great question, Haley. I'm sad to say that I don't get to read nearly as often as I'd like to. I'm really, really busy, and nowadays when I have downtime, I prefer to spend it on video games or some of my other hobbies. I'd rather be knitting. But the last thing that I read was actually a manga by Junji Ito entitled Gyo, which is Japanese for fish. And that book just rattled my chain in every possible way. Now, I don't want to get too deep into the plot because it's kind of impossible not to give spoilers. It is so bizarre. Let's just say that it has to do with viral weaponry and it's body horror, and it's really stripping the human body down to its very bare mechanisms. I realize that sounds really cryptic and bizarre, but that is exactly what this manga is. It's available in 2 volumes. You can find it on Amazon. They actually have an anthology series that has the 2 volumes together. And there's an anime movie version. And the great thing is that the anime version, while being mostly faithful to the source material, is also a little bit different. So you can watch them both. You can enjoy both mediums and get something different out of it. I would highly recommend that. Next question. What is your favorite horror anthology and why? And that's coming from Benjamin Powell. Benjamin, my favorite horror anthology is Trick or Treat. It's a 2007 anthology horror film directed by Michael Dougherty. I'm sure you've seen it. It is a very popular cult classic. It presents 4 different tales set on Halloween night, but there is a narrative thread that runs through all 4 tales, and I love the way that's done. It is so seamless. The special effects are great, the acting is great, the casting is great, lots of twists and turns, and it introduced a really iconic new horror villain in Sam, and we see him everywhere now. So that is hands down my answer. And that movie made me really excited to check out Krampus last year, which was also directed by Michael Dougherty, and he's tackling another holiday, great, but Krampus, I found it a little bit too PG-13, I found it a little too tame, especially compared to Trick or Treat, but That's my favorite. Great question. So my next question is kind of twofold. Two of you asked something that it was kind of similar, so I'm going to answer them together. One of them is Spencer Pugh. What is your least favorite horror genre? And then Lizzie Walker asks, what are some horror tropes you wish creators would stop using or maybe not use as often, and why? Great question. If there's one thing that I love talking about more than things that I love, it's talking about things that I hate. And currently, as regards horror, I am so over rape revenge films. I'm over it. It's a touchy subject, and filmmakers have to approach it with a certain gravitas. They have to be careful, and if they're not and they don't do it right, it comes off as very exploitative and demeaning to women, and it's just lazy filmmaking 90% of the time. However, that's not to say that this trope hasn't been and can't be done right. A great example is the classic 1978 film I Spit on Your Grave by Mir Zarki. Critics fucking hated it, but it has withstood the test of time as one of the better rape revenge films out there. And part of the reason is that the rape sequence is very prolonged and it's very graphic, but it's not in the least bit titillating. Nobody's comfortable watching this, much less turned on. It's graphic and gruesome and uncomfortable. And then as the film plays out, Sarah enacts her revenge by seducing these men and suggesting that she liked what they did to her, which is such a powerful critique of rape culture. And all of that was completely absent in the crap remakes. But all this to say that if you're gonna do it right. If you're not gonna do it right, and you're probably not, just don't do it. Just move on. Next up, Chelsea DeSoto asks, who is your favorite slasher? Mine would definitely have to be Michael Myers. He scared the shit out of me since I was little. Great question, Chelsea. Mine is Freddy Krueger. I love the idea of a slasher who attacks kids in their dreams, because as a narrative device that just blows the doors wide open for creativity and abstract context, and like it's dreams, so pretty much anything goes, and that's exactly how it goes in these films. As far as Freddy's backstory goes, we get it dished out a little bit at a time. We learn that he's a pedophile who is attacking kids, and so the adults in the town lynched him. But I believe it was Nightmare on Elm Street 3 where we got the entire backstory about how Freddy's mom was a nurse in a mental asylum, and then the inmates broke out and they kidnapped her and they repeatedly raped her while they held her hostage, and he's the bastard son of 1,000 maniacs. Like, mic drop. That's it. Next question. This next question comes from the King Snake. How do you feel when American movies just remake a foreign film instead of coming up with something original? Any of these remakes ruin a favorite of yours or become a new favorite? So thanks for your question, King Snake. My answer to that is I fucking hate American films that are remakes of foreign films. I fucking hate them. I've been thinking about your question for days and racking my brain to find an example that wasn't egregious and infuriating. And the best I could do is actually Gore Verbinski's The Ring, which was based off of Ringu. And I feel like if you're going to make an American remake of a foreign film, you're going to put it in America, give it an American context, change some things about it that make it more relevant to the audience that you're speaking to. I was okay with that, but when it comes to movies like Let Me In, which is pretty much a scene-for-scene reshoot of the original, and they even used some of the weird Swedish translated dialogue, which didn't work in so many ways. I'm also really sensitive to whitewashing in Hollywood. It's a bit of a hot topic right now with Ghost in the Shell being remade for American audiences, and frankly, for me, it's an issue of artistic integrity. If you're going to take a film and reshoot it shot for shot and use the same dialogue, you're not an artist. It's not art. You're not a filmmaker. What are you even doing? Next question. Lori asks, hi, Lady Hellbat. Hi, Lori. Love your channel. Thanks, Lori. What are your views on some of the films adapted from Stephen King novels? Great question, Lori. Stephen King has such a soft spot in my heart. Like many of us horror fans, I was pretty much weaned on Stephen King. I was reading horror fiction long before I was watching horror movies, which is kind of weird that that's the gateway, because reading horror fiction is actually a lot more terrifying. If you've ever really been terrified by a story, chances are it's by something you've read, because your imagination is at least 50 times more fucked up than anything they can put on screen. But when it comes to Stephen King, I read all of his books as a kid, and then I started watching the movies, and then they kind of just started to bleed together in my brain, especially when the movies are so flawed in a way that my brain kind of takes what was good about the movie and takes what was good about the book and mashes them together to be this masterpiece that just doesn't fucking exist. You know what I mean? Like, great example is It. It is a notoriously flawed movie. It's got a really bizarre third act. I think the first movie is spotless. I think it's excellent, and particularly the casting I think is really great. So when I think back on that movie, I think of events that didn't happen in the movie, like, oh yeah, like 31 Newbolt Street with the werewolf, you know, and Richie was there and blah, blah, blah. And like, that didn't happen in the movie, but I'm thinking about it and I can totally picture the movie characters doing it. So I get really confused. Now that said, I'm cautiously optimistic about the new It. At the time of this recording, there has been recently released a snapshot of what the new Losers Club is going to look like, and I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm excited to see what they do with Pennywise and all that stuff, but I think at the time that the book was written, the Losers Club was made to represent the underclass back then, and I kind of feel like, once again, speaking of remakes, if you're going to remake something, you better have something new to say, and I feel like the Losers Club could have had a couple of updates in character. Like, I don't think it's that really bizarre to have a black guy and a super fat guy in your crew, and they're not the social outcasts they once were. I don't know. It does look like they're going to be sticking pretty close to the source material, and I'm mostly okay with that, so we'll see how it goes. Next question, Matt Solis. I am generally against remakes, but sometimes they turn out pretty great. Which old school horror movie would you like to see remade for 2016? Matt, I will tell this to anybody who will listen. I have been preaching this from the highest mountains in the hopes that someone will hear me and make good my will. It's an easy one for me. It would be Flowers in the Attic. It's actually already a movie. It was a 1987 movie that was based on a young adult novel by V.C. Andrews that I loved as a kid. This stuff is actually quite a bit more scandalous than Stephen King. The storyline surrounds a family, a bunch of kids who lose their dad, and so they go hang out at their grandmother's place, but she's super ashamed of them for reasons that emerge later in the story, and she locks them up in the attic where they undergo puberty. And what does a young boy and girl think about when they're going through puberty with only each other to hang out with? I think you're reading between the lines, and that's fine. All this to say is it's a terribly taboo and titillating story, and it should make for a great movie, but the 1987 film totally sucks. And then they made another one. They made a 2014 TV film starring Ellen Burstyn as the grandmother, the chick from The fucking Exorcist, man. I was like, this is gonna be amazing. Oh, spoke too soon. Heather Graham is in it. You can't enjoy a movie that Heather Graham is in ever, can ya? Please, remake this story properly without Heather Graham. Now, the reason I'd like to see it get remade is because I really feel like it's got some very inventive and taboo ideas, and it just didn't get a fair shake. Of all of the taboos that horror deals with, rape, abduction, possession, necrophilia, like name it, we've seen it all, but incest is still really taboo in American horror cinema, which is kind of weird when you think that it's not actually illegal in all of the states. So if there are any filmmakers watching, please, please, Flowers in the Attic. Just think about it. Just think about it. Next question. Steve Sick. Can you suggest your favorite horror movie with a strong female lead? Yes, I can suggest a whole whack of them, but I've been trying to think of one that's kind of not the easy answer, that's not the answer that everyone gives. Obviously, everybody likes to talk about Martyrs and Ginger Snaps and The Descent and Alien. These are kind of the classic, super strong final girls. But the one I'm going to recommend is a lesser-known 1977 film called The Haunting of Julia, and it's also known by another title called Full Circle. Now, the film concerns a woman played by Mia Farrow, and in the opening scene, she is having breakfast in her idyllic white picket fence household with her husband and her young daughter, and her young daughter starts choking on a piece of food and starts choking so bad that this chick grabs a knife and tries to perform an emergency tracheotomy on her daughter and slits her fucking throat. I shit you not, and that's not even a spoiler. That's like in the first 5 minutes of the film. That's the backdrop that sets all of this up, okay? So you know we're into some fucked up shit. Anyway, the film goes on. Her daughter's dead. Obviously, her marriage is crumbling, and so Julia decides to move into the city, and she moves into this house that she has really strong feelings about, even though there's evidence of a haunting, and we're never really sure if she's just plagued with her own grief or if there's an actual haunting going on. Now, what I love about this film is, I mean, Rosemary's Baby is the obvious comparison. It was made very close proximity to The Haunting of Julia, and it's Mia Farrow, of course. However, Mia Farrow's role as Julia is a lot more independent, a lot more independent. It's actually startling how feminist this film is for the late 70s. She basically does her own thing. She has a whole lot of agency. Everybody is trying to tell her that she's wrong and what to do about what she's feeling and try to tell her what she's feeling. Like, talk about gaslighting, but she really sticks to her guns, and so that's the one I'm going to suggest that you check out. If you haven't seen it already, it's a very strong female lead, and last I checked, the entire movie was up on YouTube, so maybe have a look. Next, I've got another two-part question, another two-pronged question, two questions that were so similar, I want to answer it in one fell swoop. We've got Rob G, who asks, what are some themes you'd like to see more of in horror? And Jason Vandervliet asks, if you were able to make your own horror movie, what would it be about? So you heard me saying earlier that I really dig on cultural relevance in movies. And when something comes out and it's new and it's novel and it's not possession and it's not found footage and it's something totally thematically different, I'm like, I get really excited. Like, what's going on here to preempt that? What in this film are people responding to right now? And the last time that I had that feeling was a week ago. I caught an advanced screening of The Neon Demon. Rue Morgue screened it here in Toronto, and if you're unfamiliar, it's an art house horror film directed by Nicholas Winding Refn about a young girl who enters the LA fashion scene, and she's very young, she's very green, and we're obviously going to see her progress from the starry-eyed debutante to the jaded fashion model. And I was actually really leery at first of seeing a male filmmaker tackle something like the corrosive nature of beauty standards. Like, that's kind of a lady domain. I was like, what's this guy gonna have to say about this? But he nailed it. And for an art house film, I don't usually like art house films. I don't like giallo. I don't like films that are style over substance. You've heard me say this 1,000 times, especially with regard to Rob Zombie. However, this film was absolutely hypnotic. It was just the right amount of plot and just the right amount of art. And I was really drawn to the idea of artifice, the idea that nowadays with social media, we have more power than ever to construct our identity. We've got a profile picture, we can change the colors and aesthetic of our page, we can build this online persona. And if you've ever had an experience where somebody seems really outgoing and gregarious on social media and you meet them and they're very shy, you might have thought to yourself, what a strange thing it is that those two things could be so different. And so the idea of artifice, I think, is something that I'd like to start seeing pop up in horror a bit more, because it's in our world and it's in our anxieties, and if it happens, I'm the one who called it, mark my words. Eric Peterson asks, do you have some fave lesser-known horror punk, horror metal bands? I'm oddly flattered by that question, Eric. I feel like that's something you ask someone who is very cool, and I wish I was that cool. I always thought the coolest people were the ones who had heard of the cool bands before anyone else was listening to them. I had a couple of friends who would suggest music for me, and honestly, if not for them, I would be listening to the same shit as I was listening to in 1990 with my yellow Walkman. However, I don't actually have a great answer for you, but I listened to a music podcast called 6 Foot Plus, and their byline is Music and more for those who like it spooky, and every other week it comes out with an episode of psychobilly, horror punk, surf. It's amazing. I listen to it at the Rue Morgue office all the time. I highly recommend it for horror music nerds, and check it out. You might find something you like. El Gordo is a fellow horror podcaster who does a show called Talk Without Rhythm, and he's kind of like me in that we like to get pretty cerebral about horror, and he had a really long question that I'm not going to read out, but it had to do with empathy in movies, and he wrote about how he has a hard time feeling empathy for characters in home invasion movies for a variety of reasons. And it all boils down to the question, which do you find more effective at inspiring fear? Fear for oneself or fear from another? And it's a great question, and I feel like as I've gotten older, my ability to empathize with characters has shifted, and that's been something that's really interesting for me to observe. Like, for example, getting older and seeing The Exorcist. I've seen this movie 100,000 times, but when I saw it as a kid, it was all about barfing split pea soup, but now it's about the horror of the mother, and now I watch The Shining differently as well. As just becoming an older woman, I'm relating to things differently, and I'm finding the horror elsewhere. But as regards your question, when you're watching a movie and the character is not doing something you do, I know a lot of people who complain about that. I couldn't get into this movie because the protagonist was so fucking stupid. Why didn't they just do this? And why didn't they just do that? And I would have done this, and I would have done that. And I feel like if the character is well drawn enough, I can empathize with them even if they're nothing like me. I don't know if you know what I mean, but it's like, if a character is doing something that I wouldn't do, but they're still a well-rounded character with like a backstory and desires and agency and motivations and a personality, then I can get behind them doing something that I wouldn't do because it's like a friend of mine. You know what I mean? So I guess to answer your question, I almost want to recommend, if you haven't seen the original Funny Games, the original 1997 Austrian Funny Games, you should watch it because it might change your mind about home invasion movies. That movie makes me fucking sick to my stomach to even think about. All right, I have to wrap it up here, guys. I am so sorry, but I have so much work to do. We are just about a week away from Rue Morgue's first ever Dark Carnival, and I'm going to be so busy. I'm doing a panel for Faculty of Horror with my YouTube friends Bloodbath and Beyond. We've got a Black Museum panel, and I'm also moderating a Q&A with Bill Moseley, so I've got a whole bunch of Bill Moseley movies to watch. But I want to thank you so much for all those amazing questions. I wish I could have gotten to them all, but I just couldn't. And I'll definitely do this again sometime. Maybe my 1,000 subscriber episode, who knows? In the meantime, before I get to the contest, I wish I could give every single one of you a prize. You've all been so amazing, but I can't. Instead, I have a coupon code for you. Terror Threads is a brand that I became aware of because I program the Needful Things section in Rue Morgue magazine. So I'm always looking online for cool horror brands to feature, and I discovered Terror Threads. And there's two really cool things about this brand. One is that their artwork is original. In addition to having licensed movie franchises and the stuff that we've grown up with, they also have original artwork on a variety of styles of garments, which is really refreshing. In addition, they make girls stuff. Guys, I can't stress to you what a fucking novelty this is, even in 2016. Like, growing up, you might have had the same experience as me where you'd go to a punk show and you'd have to get a men's extra large and then take it home and cut it up to have to fit you. That was always my experience with punk and horror t-shirts. It was only made for guys. Nowadays, I'm so busy, I just want to buy a garment that fits, and my Terror Threads dress is so versatile and comfortable that I wear it all the ding-dong time. If you want to pick one up, go check out their website because they have graciously offered me a 10% off coupon code to celebrate 500 subscribers. If you use the coupon code BATTY10 until July 4th, you'll get 10% off your order. So go have a look, check it out, and maybe you'll see something you like. Now, on to the main event. We are going to draw for the Ghoulish Gary Pullin artwork. The winner of each of these draws will receive an 11 by 14 print of their choice that they entered, as well as a patch with the Leatherface/They Live artwork. So first we're doing Lovecraft. This is so stressful. I want you all to win. I'm never doing this again. This is awful. I literally want you all to win. The winner is Jason Vandervliet. Congratulations, Jason. Woo! And now for Poe. Ghoulish Gary Pullin actually gave me these lovely mugs, by the way. These were a birthday gift. He had just gotten back from Mexico, and so I thought that was appropriate. And the winner of the Poe print is Lori C. Congratulations, Lori. So winners, if you've just won, please get a hold of me. Email me at andrea@ladyhellbat.com and give me your mailing address so I can get this stuff out to you. I'm going to be sending them out just as soon as Dark Carnival is over and I have a chance to catch my breath. As for the rest of you, thank you so much for your questions. I hope you enjoyed this episode and you enjoy the Batty 10 coupon code. I've got lots of great stuff in store for the Bat Cave this summer, and I hope you'll subscribe and stick with us. See you next time.